So now I'm going to begin my rampant speculation about Silent Hills and what the game's going to be like, and all sorts of random guesswork judging from the small amount of information we know. So we know the game is potentially called Silent Hills 3. I guess we don't... Silent Hills... Sorry, I don't know why I said 3. Silent Hills... but we don't know that for sure. Kojima is in some way involved. Guillermo Del Toro is in some way involved. And Norman Reedus appears to play the protagonist. I think... to some extent, it's more interesting to take a look at what they've chosen to tell us and what they haven't. And so what they've chosen to tell us is really focused around star power, which I think fundamentally is sort of a weird way to approach a new Silent Hill game, is to say, like, look at all these star people we have behind it. You know, I mean, to me, I would like to say, you know, look at this cool, creepy atmosphere we have it, and certainly the PT demo is not really indicative of the Silent Hill atmosphere, and I feel like, to some extent, was underwhelming. I mean, it's kind of sort of like that one late night style of horror, where it's just kind of like, there's a thing there, and you have to keep wandering around and finding clues. But, I mean, I think focusing on the star power to some extent is almost a bad sign to me, because I feel like they're trying to say that this game won't sell itself, so we have to associate it with popular things. And, I mean, that's not to say that having Kojima and Guillermo Del Toro and Norman Reedus work on a Silent Hill game is a bad thing, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing, especially if you're a Silent Hill purist, right? Is it going to be a stealth game with long cutscenes and convoluted plots? I mean, to some extent, I mean, that's Metal Gear, the plots are complicated, they have very long cutscenes, and they're stealth games. I mean, certainly that's what Kojima is known for. Or is it going to be, like the Kojima-produced Castlevania Lords of Shadow, which seemed to have very little to do with Kojima. I don't know what his level of involvement was, but it was developed by Mercury Steam, so it wasn't even developed by Kojima Productions. I wonder if Kojima is becoming like a brand at Konami. I don't know. And Guillermo Del Toro certainly was working with THQ on Insane, which was a new horror property in development at Volition, which would have been interesting, but THQ died, and that project died with it. And I mean, certainly he's done cool horror things, but I mean, I guess I'm always a little wary of film people creating games, just because there's often not a lot of overlap. Although, I mean, like, the question is how much. Well, I guess when I say not a lot of overlap, I mean not a ton of overlap in the skill set. Certainly there's some, but I mean, I imagine he's quite busy and will be more of like an advisor, like John Carpenter was like a creative consultant or something for Fear 3. But, I mean, certainly I didn't think Fear 3 had a John Carpenter feel to it, or was the best of the Fear series. And then, of course, Norman Reedus. Everyone likes Norman Reedus, but to some extent, he's kind of, like, super badass, and so, I mean, I don't know, maybe his character range is, he can do other roles, but I mean, like, to me, and I've talked about this before in Developer Diaries, vulnerability is sort of the key to a horror protagonist, and Norman Reedus is not very vulnerable. He's kind of badass, and I wonder if we'll get sort of that, I think in Silent Hill Homecoming, I think it was Alex or whatever, he was kind of like a soldier, and there was more of a combat focus. It was kind of a little bit of a letdown. Compared to, like, say, Silent Hill 3, where you're like a teenage girl, which was much better, or, Silent Hill 2, of course, is the best. But, I mean, you're playing an adult male, but he's kind of weak and sucks at shooting, and, has awkward controls and whatnot. But, I think to some extent, right, like, Konami realizes that horror, AAA horror doesn't exactly work anymore. And I've talked about this at length, but I mean, I think just the audience is not there, for, the 6 million units or whatever they want to sell to break even. And so I think it may be, like, less horror focused, and I mean, obviously it depends on how The Evil Within and Alien Isolation do, but I suspect, well, I mean, it's interesting because, again, they sort of have names attached to them. Alien Isolation has the Alien IP, which certainly will get it some sales, but won't make or break the game. I mean, as evidenced by Aliens, Colonial Marines or whatever, which was not very good and probably sold terribly. And then, Evil Within has Shinji Mikami, is that right? The creator of the original Resident Evil, even has a similar name. So, I mean, but, I don't know the budgets on either title, but I expect they're going to have to do a lot more, and at least in looking at VG charts, and who knows how accurate VG charts is, but the best-selling Silent Hill game, according to them, sold like 1.6 million units, and it's like, that's terrible for a next-gen game, right? Like, this is the budgets for PS4 and Xbox One are much higher, and so you're looking at, like, at least with, like, Tomb Raider, they didn't sell 6 million, and they were disappointed. That was a disappointing sales number, and I mean, maybe they're developing it cheaper, or maybe, they sometimes their disappointment is actually not based on profit, but projected profit. So, like, for example, if they say, we need this much money from this title to, meet our fiscal goals, and then that title disappoints, then even if it's profitable, it can still be disappointing, which I've heard, rumors that some publishers are really bad about that, and that they're, they assume, like, the next game in a franchise will sell double, and then it only sells, like, 1.5 copies, and then they're like, this game sucks. But I don't know. But, I mean, so it's hard to say, but I think, we have to be willing to accept something more like, Resident Evil 5 or Resident Evil 6, hopefully more like Resident Evil 5, which Resident Evil 5, I enjoyed the game, but it wasn't really a horror game. I mean, obviously it had some horror elements, but it wasn't about, creating a weak, vulnerable protagonist and all the atmosphere and fear that's really the hallmark of the horror genre. So, I mean, it's quite possible that Silent Hill's maybe more of an action horror game with some jump scares. And I mean, I don't know. Certainly, I'll play pretty much anything that says Silent Hill. So I'm sold, right? Like, I'm gonna buy the game, whatever. But it's sort of strange to see them present so little about the Silent Hills aspect of it, and so much about the names and the branding almost. But I mean, on the flip side, if like, Kojima can be like a name, like the Spielberg of video games, where, it's like, I watch, like, Falling Skies or whatever, and they're like, from executive producer Steven Spielberg, and it's like, I mean, I doubt he has much time to be involved in that show, but, I mean, they already, I think Extant too, it's all, like, Amblin Television or whatever, but anyway, you know, it's like that's sort of like a stamp of approval, and the name means something, and to some extent, like that's kind of a good thing for video game developers as people, is that, you know, if all of a sudden the general game buying public cares what Matt Gilgenbach is doing, you know, even if it's not a Matt Gilgenbach game. Not that I think there's no auteurs really in games unless you're making the game all by yourself. But I mean, it's a team effort, and it's difficult to really take credit for everything in a game, especially as these team sizes balloon. I mean, certainly I have my fingers in all aspects of Neverending Nightmares, but that's not to say that, you know, I'm not John Carpenter. I didn't, you know, write the music and write the screenplay and direct it, and at least I didn't write the music. But anyway, the point I'm trying to get is that you know, I would say it's more difficult for auteurs, so to speak, in the game industry, especially when you're looking at these large team sizes, because, you know, so much has to go into the game that the director, you know, can't have control over, or shouldn't have control over. Certainly I get a lot of good ideas from the team. So anyway, that's sort of my rambling and fears for Silent Hills, but certainly I'm also excited because, again, I love Silent Hill, and, you know, could be cool. Hopefully I'm way off base and it's a return to form for Silent Hill, so I guess only time will tell. Thanks for watching.